This session discusses some basic concepts of linear time invariant systems. Linear time invariant systems can be broadly classified as continuous time systems and discrete time systems. The dynamics of the system or behavior of the system can be obtained from the system descriptions. Following lists some of the system representations for continuous time and discrete time systems. We have differential equation representation, transfer function representation and state model representation for continuous time systems. And for discrete time systems, we have difference equation representation, pulse transfer function representation and state model representation. For discrete time systems, we can see that the state model representation is a function of k, where k is the sample. Some numerical examples are given here to demonstrate the various forms of system descriptions as mentioned in the previous slide. First, we have the time domain representation where y and u are output and input respectively and they are functions of time. Here we can see that system representation will be y double dot plus 5y dot plus 6y equal to u. Next, we have the frequency domain representation for which we take the Laplace transform of equation 1. This gives the transfer function of the system. A transfer function describes the input-output relation in the S domain, that is the frequency domain. We get to know about the poles and zeros from the transfer function. Last, we have the state model representation. We had discussed three basic state model representations previously, that is the controllable canonical form, observable canonical form and diagonal canonical form. Here I take the controllable canonical form, which is also called phase variable representation. Phase variables are state variables where the state variables are output and its successive derivatives. The number of state variables depend upon the order of the system. In equation 1, we can see that we have a second order system and thus we need only two state variables x1 and x2. Output y is selected as a first state variable x1 and its derivative y dot is selected as the next state variable. Thus, x1 equal to y and x2 equal to y dot are the state variables. Now, doing some mathematical calculations, we can reach the state model as shown in equation 2. That is, x dot is equal to 0, 1 minus 6 minus 5 into x plus 0, 1 into u, y is equal to 1, 0, x. Now we see how important these representations are in knowing the stability of the systems. Are they really important? Yes, the representations indicate the behavior of the systems and stability is considered as a reflection of the behavior. Hence, the representations will definitely have something to tell about the stability of the system. Here we consider the transfer function representation. The transfer function is basically the ratio of Laplace transform of the output to the Laplace transform of the input. So, if you consider the transfer function 1 by s plus 3 into s plus 2, we can write the partial fraction expansion form as 1 by s plus 2 minus 1 by s plus 3. If we give an impulse input to the system, we can see that the impulse response will be y of s is equal to 1 by s plus 2 minus 1 by s plus 3 because the Laplace transform of the impulse input is 1. So, u of s becomes 1 and the equation 1 reduces to equation 2. Looking at equation 1 and 2, we can see that they are same and impulse response can be written as in the time domain y of t is equal to e raised to minus 2t minus e raised to minus 3t. In short, impulse response and transfer function are the same. Here we consider some function representations. Let us start with y is equal to e raised to minus 80, which is an exponentially decreasing function. The response in the previous slide was y is equal to e raised to minus 2t minus e raised to minus 3t. It is plotted in the figure and we can see that y is a decaying function. So, any function of the form e raised to minus 80 will be an exponentially decreasing function or it can be treated as a decaying function. This has resulted from the transfer function 1 by s plus 2 minus 1 by s plus 3. So, this shows that if the poles have negative real part, we get an exponentially decreasing function. The figure given below shows various pole positions. In the first case, we have this pole. It is a complex conjugate pair of poles. It has negative real part and imaginary part. The imaginary axis basically represents the damped frequency of oscillation. So, if you have poles on the negative side which are complex, then it has both real part and the imaginary part. Hence, we can see that there will be an exponentially decaying response and also it has some oscillations. The oscillations are due to the frequency component omega d. And if you consider a pole with no frequency part, that is with no imaginary part, then oscillations will be absent. But since it has negative real part, there will be definitely an exponentially decreasing function as the response. And now if we move to the right side, we can see that the real part will be positive. And hence we have exponentially increasing response for poles with positive real parts. If it has a complex number, definitely there will be some oscillations also associated with the response. And in the case when the poles are on the imaginary axis, we can see that there will not be an exponentially increasing or decreasing envelope. It will be purely sustained oscillations just because it has pure frequency component alone. So, to the left side, if the poles appear, we can say the response will be decaying. If towards the right, we can say the response will be increasing. And if it is on the imaginary axis, we can say it will be sustained oscillation. So, if it is decaying, it shows that the response settles. And settling of the response is called stability. We can say the system has a stable response. And if it is increasing, we can say it is unstable. So, stability in short basically tells you whether the system response settles towards the equilibrium position. This shows that the poles have something to do with the stability of the system. Now we take the third representation, that is x dot equal to ax plus bu, y equal to cx plus du. X of t, which is the response or the solution of the state equation, has two components. One is zero input response and the other is zero state response. Why we call the first part as zero input response? This is because if you consider the input as 0, that is u of s will be 0 then. If the input is 0, the second part will be totally absent. And hence x of t will have only Laplace inverse of Si minus A inverse into x of 0. Hence this term is called zero input response. Then coming to the next part. If the state is 0, that is x of 0 equal to 0, then we can see that the first part will be absent. We are left with only the second part. So x of t will be just Laplace inverse of Si minus A inverse into B into u of s. Hence it is called zero state response. And in time domain representation, x of t can be e raised to at into x of 0 plus integral 0 to infinity e raised to a t minus tau v u tau d2. If we consider zero input response, we can see that x of t decays provided the poles of Si minus A inverse are towards the left half of the S-plane. This is because the zero input response has a term Si minus A inverse. So, if x of t has to decay, then the corresponding function should be a decaying function. This can be achieved only if the poles of Si minus A inverse are towards the left, because Si minus A inverse will be basically an S function. So, Si minus A inverse is given by adjoint of Si minus A by determinant of Si minus A. The characteristic roots of determinant Si minus A equal to 0 are the eigenvalues of matrix A. Hence, we can say the zero input response decays only if the eigenvalues are towards the left half of the S-plane. Here we see the relation between the poles and the eigenvalues of the system matrix. We consider three different cases. The first case is a controllable state model, and the controllability can be checked with Kalman's test. With the help of the transfer function equation C into Si minus A inverse into B plus D, we can see that the poles are at S is equal to minus 3 and S is equal to minus 2. If you find the eigenvalues of A, we can see that eigenvalues are S is equal to minus 3 and minus 2. It can be noted that the poles and eigenvalues are same here. Next we consider a case with an uncontrollable state model. Again it can be checked using Kalman's test. The transfer function will give you a transfer function as 2 into 1 minus S by S plus 1. Poles of the transfer function are S is equal to minus 1. We have only one pole. The eigenvalues of A will give you S equal to minus 1 and S is equal to plus 1. This shows that poles and eigenvalues are not equal, but pole is a subset of eigenvalue, just because it is an uncontrollable state model. If you look at the state model, we can see it is a second order one, whereas the transfer function is a first order one. This is because there is a pole zero cancellation. Now we move on to the third case, that is an unobservable system model. Again this can be checked using Kalman's test. The transfer function says it is a second order one, whereas the state model says it is a third order one. It can be seen that the pole at S is equal to 1 gets cancelled with the 0 at S is equal to 1. The poles of transfer function are at S is equal to minus 2 and minus 3, whereas the eigenvalues are obtained as S is equal to 1, minus 2 and minus 3. Here again we can see that the poles are not equal to the eigenvalues, but they are a subset of the eigenvalues. And the pole at S is equal to 1 got cancelled with the 0, and hence it is not reflected in the actual transfer function, though it is present. Now we move to the concept of stability. Stability, as mentioned before, it is actually a condition where the system response settles towards the equilibrium point. And as far as linear time invariant systems are concerned, there are two notions of stability. One is bounded input, bounded output stability and internal stability. Let us start with bounded input, bounded output stability. By definition, bounded input, bounded output stability says if you give a bounded input to a system like this one, that is modulus of x of t less than or equal to C1 less than infinity, which means that input should be within a particular limit. Then if the system is bivostable, that is bounded input, bounded output stable, definitely you will get an output y of t which is less than t2 less than infinity, which means that the output also will be bounded. And to explain in detail, we consider the transfer function y of s by x of s like this. So y of t will be e raised to minus 2t minus e raised to minus 3t into x of t. So we can say that here if x of t is within a limit, that is we apply an input within a limit, and if you expect the output to be within the limit, this occurs only if this part is within a particular limit. That is, this function should not increase as time passes. And this happens only if the poles are towards the left half of the S-plane. In short, we can say that bounded input, bounded output stability occurs only if the system is inherently stable. And if the poles have the system have negative real parts, it will be inherently stable, and we can say the system will be definitely bounded input, bounded output stable. And it can be looked in another way, like we have seen that impulse response and transfer function are the same. So if transfer function is such that the response decays, the impulse response also will be decaying function. So we can also write if the system is bounded input, bounded output stable, then its impulse response h of t will be such that it will be totally integrable. That is, integral 0 to infinity h of t dt will be less than or equal to a finite value. So bounded input, bounded output stability in short says the system is inherently stable. If the system as such is inherently stable, it will definitely be bounded input, bounded output stable. So for an inherently stable system, if you give an unbounded input, we cannot expect the system to give a bounded output. Then naturally the output also will be unbounded. So we need to give a bounded input and check whether you get a bounded output. If that is the case, we can ensure that the system is inherently stable. Now let us consider the system response given by x of t is equal to Laplace inverse of Si minus A inverse into x of 0 plus Laplace inverse of Si minus A inverse into B into U of s. We have seen that the first part is 0 input response and the second part is 0 state response. Bounded input bounded output stability, as mentioned before, is something that is related to a bounded input. So it is related to the input part, and we can say that it is related to the poles of the system. Whereas internal stability, it is related to the eigenvalues of the system. So we have seen that eigenvalues are a superset of poles. So if you want or ensure that the poles should be lying towards the left half of the S-plane, it is enough to ensure that the eigenvalues are lying towards the left half of the S-plane. If all the eigenvalues of matrix A are lying towards the left half of the S-plane, then definitely the poles also will be lying towards the left half of the S-plane. This is because poles are a subset of eigenvalues. Hence, if the system is internally stable, we can ensure that bibo stability is present. Finally, to conclude, is bibo stability related to internal stability? If there are no pole zero cancellations, bibo stability implies internal stability. That is, the poles and eigenvalues are same in that case. Hence, bibo stability means internal stability. If there are pole zero cancellations, then the system may appear to be bibo stable due to the stable poles, but the system need not be internally stable due to the presence of unstable eigenvalues. This could be seen from the example 3 of the previous slides. In short, for any case, we can conclude that if internal stability is assured, the system will be bibo stable. Hence, for linear time invariant systems, it is enough to find the position of the eigenvalues to evaluate the stability of the system. Hence, rather than finding the poles, we are interested in the roots of the characteristic equation, which are the eigenvalues. So, during the early days, when computing machines and methods were not that popular, in order to find the roots of the characteristic equations of very high order systems, some easy tricks were required, and thus evolved the Routh-Hurwitz criterion and related methods. Thank you.